Today on Geek Shop, we're talking lettering. Old school, new school, digital, whatever. It's lettering. So, let's take a walk to the Geek Shop.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Geek Shop. I'm Chetan, and my sidekick is...
Chris, your little lovable sidekick.
Yes. So today we're talking about the dreaded thing most comic creators hate. What is it, Chris?
Lettering.
All of us. There's a few of us who are amazing at it, but I would say, 99% of us are bad at it?
Yeah, I think so. Although, I think some of us are better at it than we think we are. I think, though, of most comic book artists, except for a few people, most comic book artists, it's the part they least like doing, and it's also the part that they're most self-conscious about. Like, they'll do a beautiful piece of art, and they'll, lettering will look fine, but they'll focus on how horrible the lettering is.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Which is pretty amazing, considering, you think about it, there's a lot of famous artists out there, comic book artists, but very few comic book artists letter their own stuff. Very few.
Oh, very few. No, so. I think, now, here's the worst part of it is, with the digital age and computer age, lettering has become so easy to do. And there's, compared to, let's say, even 20 years ago, there's hundreds of fonts out there that mimic hand lettering and comic style lettering.
Yeah, for sure. Comic Sans, the best one, right?
Yes, that's it. Yes. Okay, so now explain to the people watching why we're talking about lettering.
So we got inspired to do this episode because I was doing a lecture at the Goethe Institute, which you can watch the video. We'll put a link somewhere, or just check our past videos, and you'll see them there. But I was doing a lecture, and I got questions at the end of it. And one of the questions I was asked was, why don't comic books use lowercase letters? And I had a sort of answer that I thought was right. I wasn't 100% sure. And that my theory was that letterers and the tools that letterers use were based off of architectural tools. And architects use uppercase for the same reason that a lot of government documents ask you to put your letters, your name in all caps, because it tends to be sort of technically clearer if you're writing letters in all caps. So my sort of theory / answer I gave this person was, it probably came from that, but I think probably a lot of the early letterers in comic books were probably more architects that were getting hired as opposed to the actual comic book artists.
That's my thinking. I didn't even think about the government documentation, but you're right about that. Because to make it legible, and people like me who have bad handwriting, my capitals and lowercase are scribbles, really.
And the thing about, if you think about letters, particularly lowercase, an L is just a line. It's not an L. And even a lowercase I is just a line with a dot, whereas the I, an uppercase or true uppercase I has the two lines and then the single thing. There's a lot of lowercase that are really sort of simplified versions of the uppercase, or sort of reimaginings of it in a very simplified way. So I think probably back then, way back in the day when architects were doing stuff by hand and when governments decided to make you do all caps in your forms, a lot of that was because uppercases are just visually so much different. And so when you have somebody who's has to input 1,000 names, an hour into a computer or into a ledger back then, it was made sure that it was 100% clear
100%, yes.
what the letters were. So I also think it slows me down. I don't know if this is why they do it, but when I'm filling out a form, a government form, and it tells me to do my name in all caps in square boxes, I write slower and so therefore neater.
But see, for me, this is going back when I was a teenager. A lot of things when I used to put my name, even my first name and last name, the first letters, I always put in lowercase.
Wow. So even the first letter?
Yeah. If you look at a lot of my, even when I put my name down on a document and stuff, it's always lowercase, everything. I think it was
That's
one of those
interesting.
things where maybe it's like, fight the system. I'm doing it my way. you know.
That or mild dyslexia.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it. Okay.
Either rebellion or mild dyslexia, one or
No,
the other.
I forget about the rebellion part.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I find a lot of people. I'm fairly dyslexic, and my handwriting is awful.
so
So
here's a question for you: when you were aspiring teenage artist, looking around for comics, okay, animation you can't do lettering. I mean, not you know standard
yeah.
lettering, but comics wise, let's talk about comics. Did you know about lettering? Did you know how they did it? And was there any certain names that came out to you saying, this person's a letterer? I mean, you see it in the comic books, but explain to me how you first became aware of this.
I'll say that mine. I didn't think about lettering. Like when I read comic books as a kid, I didn't think about the lettering. Like it just. I think particularly early on, like the idea of drawing a comic book was so far away from me. Like the art was beyond what I could do. I didn't even think about the fact that I had to write neatly. So strangely, the only time that I really started to think about lettering, like I did a few zines when I was in high school, like early high school, and the lettering was just atrocious, but the artwork was also sort of kind of atrocious too. So I didn't really care that much. And I sort of, like you did said, screw the system. I'm not gonna letter neatly. I'm just gonna letter with my scribble. But to be honest, like when I first thought of the idea of the fact that people had to letter comic books, by that point, I think I had already started to work at Curry's. And if you look back at our past episode where we talked about, you and I, working at the art store together. So by that point, I had already sort of had the tools potentially in front of me. So I had a little bit of a weird sort of introduction. Like there was never a point when I really gave lettering a thought and didn't have like somebody around me, either you or Tom, who's actually really good at lettering, to sort of show me how it's done. I couldn't master how it was done, but at least I could see another
Get
human
the
being do it.
ideas down, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think I really thought about it much. Like it's something like even when I was into drawing but didn't work at the art store. I mean, I got into animation first, so the idea was more voice records and things like that. So when I saw comic books, I sort of went, well, that was just, that's just a thing that's done, and I didn't even think about it that much. So I didn't really. Did you have a particular like moment where you went, "Oh my God, I've got to do this," or "I've got to actually put proper lettering on a book"?
I think I did lettering same way as everyone else. Just got a ruler, drew out the lines, and lettered. Did not think about all caps. Did not think about lowercase or anything like that. Now, one of the earlier letterers I remember was I'm hoping I pronounce his name right, Tom Ozerowski or something like that. He did lettering
Okay.
for X-Men. I remember that.
Okay.
Chris Claremont wrote it, and I remember seeing his name. And then when as a teenager who's like looking at a comic book and getting in all the detail and everything, you're reading all the critics page.
Yeah.
Everything. Who lettered, who penciled, who inked, who edited the book, and I remember his name popping up a lot. Now, what was that? There's another one, Saladin, something. Trying to remember his name, Saladin or something like that. He was another letterer, which I remember seeing his name a lot. So there's two letters I remember seeing, like because when you open a book and you see the same name over and over again, you're going, okay, this person does this and that. But technique wise, it took me years and years to, find out how people did lettering because you couldn't look it up on YouTube. We didn't have YouTube back then.
Yeah. I imagine part of the reason why names for letterers kept coming up over and over again is I imagine, and I'm sure you could go through all the old Marvel and DC comics, that they didn't actually have that many letterers in their bullpen because, I mean, you could letter a book. A good letterer can do it really quickly and could probably get a book done in a day or two.
I think that was it because I think, the process of comic creation at that time, the assembly line process was, I think, colorists and letterers had no time to do anything really. I mean, I hate to say it, colorists and letterists at that time, they weren't seen as artists really.
No, No. I mean, inkers were barely seen as artists back then.
That's what.
So
Yeah, that's another episode we'll do on. But
yeah.
yeah, letterers. I think Yeah, I don't think they. Yeah, here, come into the office, letter the pages, have the story finished by end of the day.
I feel like probably a letterer, if you talked to the artists and the writers, like who work there, they would probably go, "Oh my God, the letterist is so important." "Oh my God," like they would probably say it, but they never definitely got any kind of credit in the book besides occasionally a little name in the credits and things like that. So I think they were sort of low on the totem pole for the fans. But I imagine, like, if I was an artist or a writer back then, I couldn't letter, I would be like, "Oh, thank God someone can do this for me. I don't have to do this."
But here's the thing: think about the old process. Let's say I'm gonna get let's use Marvel as an example. So, penciler comes in, submits the pages to the editor. The editor has to give it to the letterer and say, "I need this done ASAP. Book's coming out." Imagine the pressure on the letterer because you have the inker waiting for you. Waiting to ink the pages.
So I always thought the letterer went after the inker.
No, if I remember, it was the penciler, then the letterer. Because remember, most of the lettering was done on the actual page. I think some.
Okay.
I think some letterers, if I do remember, did paste up.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I always thought that I to be honest, like when in official terms, like I tend to do my lettering last.
No, I think if I remember the stages, and I'll look at some of my art. I have the artisan edition of some of the, Joe Kubert and all those books. I'll look in that, but I do remember, if I remember the process, pencils, letters, inks, then colors.
So does that mean that, I mean, obviously the letterer inks the lettering, right? It's not just.
Yeah, it's inked in. The word balloons are all placed, and I think the writer, if I remember, the writer and the editor indicates sometimes or most of the time where the word balloon should go.
Yeah. Although I'm sure these guys that have done like 100 books might just go, you know what, they probably have it down where the editor and the writer's like, you know how to do an X-Men book. You've done 100 already. You're
And
fine.
you have to remember, at those times, especially like going back to our childhood, like my childhood, going back to the '80s, at that time comics were mass produced, so you had a monthly schedule, and they don't care if the artwork, story, or artwork, lettering, or inking is top notch. Come on, it's like, here, get this done right away.
I mean, I know both you and I live in more of the indie comic thing, but I do also sometimes work in commercial stuff. And to be honest, you will lose more jobs and more contacts if you're late than if you produce bad artwork.
That's it. I think that's it. Yeah.
And so I think I'm sure, but again, I feel like too, the letterers were probably, because there were so few of them and they were so dedicated, and there's probably certain guys that can just whip off a book in like a day. They were probably also the place where they were like, if they needed extra time, like if they're like, they probably book like 2 or 3 days for the letterer, but then the artist is a day behind, and they probably go to the letterer and go, "You got 2 days to do it now."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And as long as it isn't some over verbose Chris Claremont X-Men where he has 4 paragraphs in every page sometimes in his text balloons, then I think he's a little verbose. He's got a lot of dialogue in his stuff. So I imagine certain certain writers and artists teams, were easier on letterers than other ones.
Now, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I imagine being a letterer back then was probably fairly lucrative, because I mean you're probably paid by book, and you're adding such a, and I'm not going to say small amount, because it's such an important part, and a part that I could never imagine doing, but it's such a thing that notionally I think you could probably do fairly quickly if you're good at it. But yet I'm sure you get paid fairly well.
That's the thing, and I'm wondering. I'm gonna look it up and post it on what the page rate was for letterers. But my thing is, imagine sitting on a drafting table and using our trusty Ames guide. which we have here, and we'll go into detail about that afterwards. So imagine, taking your T-square and, sitting in the Marvel offices. Mind you, I mean, if you're doing a monthly book, the editor's not going to care how, if it's 100% perfect or not. It's like, get it done attitude.
The thing too is like we look at it, like you and I look at it as like, oh my God, that would hurt my brain. Like I would hate to do that. But somebody who is maybe trained as an architect who's like, I don't really want to like make superhero poses. Like I'm not into that. I'm like a technical artist. I like doing things. I like measured things. I like rulers, things like that. If you're that kind of brain person, like this is like a dream job for you because
Yes.
you don't have to worry about the editor getting mad at you because the story sucks. Chances are no letterer ever delayed a book, so they're not getting yelled at for that. They're
And
getting paid.
you can't really screw up on that. I mean,
No.
okay, let's say you have a spelling error or whatever, you miss it. I hate to say it, that's going to come on blame of the editor because they have to read the story and say, hey, there's a mistake here.
Yeah, I mean, there's it just seems like when I've worked at a few studios, like animation studios, and a few people, there are a few artists who are like, I don't want to be like the creative guy. Like I just love there's guys I knew who did backgrounds who like to do like, oh my God, like there was one guy I knew who liked to 3D model car parts. Like he did 3D models of cars. He did every component of the engine, every screw.
Oh, wow.
And he loved it. Like he would just be like, "This is the greatest day." There was one where we had to do a car getting wrecked in a car accident, and so all the parts had to fall apart. He was in heaven because he got to build a car in 3D, every single part,
So
and
I
then
guess
how
you're
it
right
ripped
because
apart.
I guess you're right because the person who's used to their tools of the trade can go in and just have that mindset ready. It's like us, when we're drawing a page, you have your tablet set up or you have your page set up, and you know exactly how to do it, how to lay out the pages. It's in your, it's a routine.
And remember that episode we did about blocks, mental blocks
Yes.
and stuff like that? That doesn't exist for this person.
I wonder if
Professionally.
for letters, does that come up?
I don't think so.
That would be
They
an
have their
interesting
letters. They
question.
have their font. They have their font that they do. They have their style
Yes,
that they do.
but they might look at the letter and go, "This is not coming out the way I want."
I mean,
Now,
you could doodle a little bit, but I
No,
don't
but-
think you're like stuck.
I wonder if any of you are professional letterers. Please let us know if you have a letters block.
Yeah, call us from the 1920s.
Yes, yes.
I don't think there's font designers, sure, but I don't know if there's any letterers left in the world.
I think most of them are digital letterers now. Now, mentioning that, is there any letterers that you could think of, like ones that at this day and age, names that stand out?
I forget his name, but Sergio Aragonis, writer, I think he did the lettering too.
Mark Evanier?
I think Mark Evanier might have done the lettering for at least a bunch of Gru.
I thought it was the colorist who did the lettering, wasn't it? Tom
Maybe it
Lou?
was. Maybe it was, but I remember because he used to have comic strips of him, all of them together, arguing over stuff, and there would always be sort of like these, fun comics. So that's really the only one I can think of
Okay,
offhand.
let's look that one up. We'll put a link up. Let's look that one up. No, Gru-wise. It's
Okay,
not Tom Lou.
I have a confession to make. We
Yes.
just took a 2-second break,
Yes.
and I looked up who lettered Gru comic books.
I did the same.
Stan Sakai.
I did the same thing, and I feel so guilty of it because he's an amazing artist, amazing letterer, and I forgot his name. I thought it was Tom Loof, but I remember, yes, and yes, he's an amazing letterer.
He has like an amazing letter, and like again, he's one of those things. And the reason I remember him is because Sergio used to do comic strips of like creating Gru sometimes, and there's even a few comic books where he gets a little meta where he meets Gru in his own comic books.
Oh yes, yes.
So like there's a bit of that, and I know Mark Evanier is often the main one, but there's a few where there's been in this. He sort of pretends that they all work in a studio together, and there's at one point where there's a lettering thing, and since Sergio's language his English is apparently not great in the interviews I've seen. It's okay, but it's not. He's not confident with his English, so he used to always like praise his letterers and his writers, because they're the only ones that made GRU make any sense to English speakers.
Yes, so that's one. Stan Sakai is an amazing letterer. I mean, we'll talk about his artwork at another video, but for lettering wise, he amazing. Now, one guy that I remember and is a legend is Todd Klein.
Yeah.
And I once in a while I'll go to his website. He does blogs on his website about lettering and all kinds of things. But just watching his seeing his work, it's amazing.
Okay, so I'm going to do a plug for something here, and I'm going to do something that I think we should do. It would be a fun experiment. Why don't we have a new Instagram account? So we'll have a link below. Make sure to follow us. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow. I think we should see if any of these guys have Instagram accounts, because I would be super curious about what a letterer posts on his Instagram account. Is it like, oh, I've got this new way to do a letter A that's so awesome, or something like that? So let's see if we get any of these guys. I don't know if even any of them are still working.
Actually, one of the guys that I follow on Instagram, I hope I pronounce his name right, Nate Piekos.
Yeah.
He's a letterer and he does Blambot fonts. And again, thank you, Nate. He provides a lot of fonts for independent creators, and they're free to use, license. There's no fees or anything, which is great. Well, I'll put a link down here just to thank him for it. But he does post when he's created a new font. I have seen him post the stages on how he creates a font.
So I think why don't we'll start this off. Follow us on Instagram. Check out who we're following, and we'll post a couple. We're gonna follow them along, and if you notice anything, if we notice anything on their Instagram that's like that, we'll like it and possibly share it on our Instagram. So keep an eye open for that, because I think that's something that people might be interested in. Because to me, I mean, I'm never going to get into doing I'm done. I draw the line. I'm never going to be a font creator, and I'm never going to be a letterer in my life.
But
I'm fascinated by it.
But his page is really good because, and I'm going to plug his book. He put out a new book on lettering also. Okay. And he's been putting a post up on stages of how he creates, how he does the letters and everything. And his Instagram page is a great page to follow.
Cool. That's really cool. I think it's again, lettering and anything like that is mind-blowing to me. So, it's one of those things that I and we can talk about this if you want to, but my guilt is that I use almost entirely digital lettering. The only time I don't is if it's like part of the artwork.
Now, for me, I used to do hand lettering for my mini comics, and I'll show a sample here. Again, using the trusty Ames guide, I use that, and going back to non-internet age and all that stuff, trying to figure out how to use these things was difficult. I mean, I don't have the instructions that came with this when I bought this. It does show you some instructions on how to use it, but honestly, it made no sense to me, especially lettering a comic page.
I'm just looking at my Ames guide as you're discussing this. I'll be honest, I haven't used my Ames guide in years. But the other thing too is when I did do some lettering and when I have tried to use Ames guides, the setting, where the little wheel goes.
Yes.
In the setting, it was set once. I think Tom set it for me once, and I literally taped it, so it wouldn't move.
That's what I was going to mention. I remember getting advice from someone, and this is years ago, and this one doesn't have tape because I haven't used it in years, saying, once you have it set up to whatever specifications you want it or whatever the standards is, tape it so it doesn't move. And I remember that. And that's one of the clear things I remember. Now, using this guide, I'm going to plug Jim Rugg of Cartoonist K-Fit. He does an amazing video on how to use an Ames guide. So please have a watch. We'll put a link at the bottom. And that's all I'll say about the Ames guide for now. Watch Jim Rugg's video, because I can't, recommend that enough because if you want to try this, use it. Now,
Yeah.
what I was saying earlier was when I was doing the mini comics, I used the Ames guide, did the lettering. Then when I bought my computer and of course graphic design programs came out and stuff and start scanning artwork. If you look at some of them old mini comics, the lettering and the font I used, oh, it was bad. I didn't even use Comic Sans. It was just bad computer fonts.
Oh man, Times New Roman.
I can't remember what font it was. It just looked so bad. So, going back, again, the digital age as it was coming around for art, and especially comic books, at that time you had fonts were becoming a thing, but at that time your computer, let's say whatever, if you had an iMac or a Macintosh computer at that time, the fonts that came with it were basic fonts. And to buy fonts were super expensive at that time. But again, at that time, I don't remember early 90s or mid 90s if they even had decent comic fonts.
I seem to remember you early on in some TikTok Tom stuff also using a letter set, like rub-on letters to just kind of do like almost like ransom note looking fonts.
Yes, that was the old school, let me try some of that, but that was tedious. It's because you have to line it up properly, and especially the rub down letter set. What was it called? I can't remember the name of it. The rub down lettering. Sometimes those rub down lettering, if it was old, it would crack. Or it would peel off.
The good thing about TikTok Tom at the time, and still TikTok Tom now, is it's kind of a surreal comic. So if you have like a cracked letter E, it kind of actually works with the story a little bit.
It was a good mistake.
Yeah.
And for me, for lettering and stuff, it's just, I remember when I was one of the programs I bought at that time was called Manga Studio. This is going back now 15, 20 years ago, and which is Clip Studio now. I remember when I first downloaded that program, they had fonts in there that was made for comics, which I was impressed.
Yeah. There's a few out there now that are really good. Like I have about 3 or 4 that I use, pretty much, that are just my go-to at this point.
Oh, same here. I have one that I use. I've just been using, and again, thanks to Blambot fonts, I downloaded a font called Crime Fighter, and I've been using that for a long time now.
I have one. It's a guy called Anime something. I don't remember what it's called.
And that's the good thing nowadays. You could, if I had the time and the energy, or if I'm gonna say I'm lazy on this, I could create my own hand lettering font, but who has the time?
Called TikTok Tom, the font.
Yeah. No, because I've seen people do it on YouTube, and I've seen people mention, taking their handwriting and, making those into fonts. And I'm going, first of all, my handwriting's,
Yeah.
Who would want to even see that as a font?
So this is sort of font adjacent, but sort of related at the same time. And I'm coming across this now because Blue Orchid's starting to I'm starting to see it in the wild, and particularly after I did my lecture, like I was selling some books there and everything like that. And so your signature that you sign comic books with, which is font related, Matt Groening signs his signature in the Simpsons font that everybody knows. Have you got a signature that you use to sign TikTok Tom comics?
Yes, I used to. Now I just do my regular signature.
So anybody that's got a book signed by Chetan in like the last year or two, go to the bank.
Here, I'll show you. Oh, no,
sign it, write a check, just copy that, and it'll all be good.
Yes, that's it. And you know what? And I used to sign it just my first name. And for the last little while, yeah, actually, that's interesting you brought that up, because I consciously don't remember why I changed it.
Yeah, I used to have I have a signature that I don't use for anything except for like official documents and stuff like that. And I tend, when I'm signing a book, I tend to just to put Chris S. in the signature.
Okay.
And I've had different variations of that for a while now, and I'm trying to just get one that I like. But you know, I think depending on the comic book, like when I was doing my lecture, I had like a lineup of people that wanted to get signed books, and so I had to go quick. And unfortunately, like the first person that came in line, there was nobody else around, so I did like a little sketch of Blue Orchid in their book, because I thought, oh, somebody's actually buying a book. How cool. And then suddenly there's like 7 people in line to buy a book, and I'm thinking, they've all seen me do a sketch. I now have to do like
it for every one of them.
Every one of them. And so I was like kind of in a rush. And so my signature just kind of went all over the place because I was more focused on just getting the little sketch right than I was about the signature. So I'm sort of like started to rethink my signature. It's still going to be the Chris S. and nothing else.
So let me ask you this. This subject matter we're talking about now, I'm going to bring this up. We should challenge each other and do one page of a drawing, a comic page, and hand letter it. You know what? Not now. We'll wait because we've done how we create our art. Now it's lettering. We'll talk about our stages of. We'll do another video on, how we, step by step on creating a page. Maybe another video on inking. Then a comic page creation.
Yeah, we can do that. The only thing if we do it is I need to talk to Tom to figure out how to set up my Ames guide again.
Yes,
and
that's
tape
it. Yeah,
because I don't remember where it was when I originally did it. So
I'm going to bring up an interesting story, and I remember this is where Tom Yo and a couple other people, we talked about this years ago. Do you remember EC Comics? Their lettering. They used to use that. What's that? Architectural lettering guide.
Oh,
the ones that had the
like the long line, and then you just traced it.
Pico. Was it Pico?
I think it's Pico.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you put in the letter and basically kind of traces it out into the. And I'm thinking that's time consuming.
That's almost like rub-on letterings.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I mean, maybe there's a system, like maybe if you have a drafting table with a drafting arm, like there's a way you can do it quicker.
But then again, you have to remember in the 50s and you're going back to the 50s, most studios had drafting tables and T-squares and set squares and everything that you would need to use those type of tools.
Yeah, because I feel like once you have a setup done and you have a system ready, it might be fast, but it's just, like we're talking about, like for me and you, like if I was to try and set up one of those things, I would have to like pull out my page, figure it out. I've got a small little drafting table that I use. I don't use like a full-size one or anything.
If I remember, Ed Pescor, I think he did a page using that.
Yeah, he demoed it once, I think, on Cartoonist Kayfabe. So
that's it. Yeah. Yes, but you're right. I think now this day and age, come on. I mean, I have a T-square somewhere that's hanging on my wall here, and I haven't used it in. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I used a T-square.
You want to know the best thing to use a T-square for nowadays? Christmas time, wrapping paper, and if you want to rip the wrapping paper just right, if you're at your dining room table, just use it as like a ripping arm.
I thought you might scratch your back.
No. Use it because you get the perfect straight rip in wrapping paper. So you basically put your T-square down and sort of measure off the amount of wrapping paper you want, then pull it up, and you get it like I remember at Curry's. At the other stores, like when people would buy craft paper and stuff, you didn't cut it with a knife. You just rip it off of the little sort of flat. Use your T-square for the same thing for wrapping paper.
Same idea, yes. But
so that's what I use it for.
So most studios, I would say, in the 50s and 60s up until the mid-90s, probably had studios set up to accommodate everything like that. I mean, I remember, what was it? One of those drafting arms that had the pulley system with the wires and stuff. Yep. I remember seeing those everywhere. I mean, even at the art store, we used to sell those. And I remember it was like, I wanted to get one of those because it was just like, you move it up and down and you could put your set square. It was all set up for you. And I'm thinking, if you're a professional studio doing, comic creation or graphic design or anything else like that, you could use that, pop in your, Pico guides or, and
I'm sure
start
they had
lettering like
adapters.
crazy.
I'm sure they had adapters for those types of tables.
Oh, I'm
where you
sure,
could just
yes.
set it up, click it in, and you'd have a table just set up for that. And so literally, as I said, there's a dude whose sole job it is to do lettering, probably has this whole thing set up like that, and it's just super fast for him to do it. And again, it might seem boring to some of us, but I'm sure there's some people that are just, their brains are connected that way that they would absolutely love it. So.
In one of the books I mentioned in a previous video by Steve Parkhouse, there's a section on lettering, and he's another guy who's a great letterer. I'll put up an image of that book up also, and I have to reread that section on lettering, see what his how he does his pages. But I remember as a teenager, it's like, wow, this is a interesting process.
Yeah, interesting process that I still can't stand.
And in that one, that's when I remember in that one, actually, that brings up the point about what we were saying earlier, where he was showing samples, if I remember, where he's doing lettering on original art. Then before in the pencil stages, then he's showing samples where he's doing it on I don't remember what they called it at that time, but sticker paper. So he's doing it on that, then he's pasting the lettering on top of the ink pages.
So yeah, I mean the one thing about like getting into lettering, I mean actually we this is the longest conversation we've ever had, I think, on this thing. It's such a niche subject, but I think a lot of people who do lettering loved it, and I think you're talking about the different times where he did paste up and pencil and everything like that. I think one of the other things, if it works anything like animation, I imagine that the letterer didn't always get the work at the pencil stages when he was supposed to get the work.
Oh, probably.
And I imagine that sometimes there would be a delay because it's a schedule. He has to do a book, then he has to do another book. But if there's 5 books that are ready, they might send one to ink, and then he gets it afterwards anyway.
Oh, that's it.
And then he does paste ups and stuff like that. So I imagine that to some degree, sort of, and this is, there's a couple areas of animation that I can relate this to in my brain, which is the final edit and compositing, where a lot of the times it's where corners get cut and things have to sort of be sped up is in that. And I imagine lettering was a part where it was well, just, if you have to pass the letterer when they normally get it, they're just going to get it after even coloring and just have to do paste ups and things like that.
Now, here's one thing I will say about letterers is, and especially looking in the old comics growing up and stuff, and I have to give them credit, and they're unsung heroes when they do word balloons and tails.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an art unto itself.
Yeah, it seems really simple, but I do my word balloons. My word balloons are almost a separate entity than my lettering.
You know what? And like you said, it seems so easy. It's not. And how many times have we I have the ellipse guide. I have different templates and stuff, and it just, you could use the ellipse guides, but they don't look good as it doesn't look good as what professional letterers do.
So I mean, I know you do most of your work digital now, so obviously you do your word balloons digital now. So there's a bit of a simplicity to that, because one of the great things is most drawing programs have a thing where you can make a perfect ellipse.
One thing I would say about Clip Studio Paint, and again, plug in Clip Studio, is it makes it so easy for you to do everything. Yeah. The word balloons and the balloons especially, you could shape it to, they give you a lot of options to manipulate the oval shape and everything like that. So they make it easy. And you could customize it to whatever styles you want.
Yeah, Procreate has a lot of options as well. Like I use
Same thing
Procreate
with the
pretty much.
tails and stuff like that. So now I think the programs, I think, the good part about modern age is they know there's a lot of people into comics and manga and like creating stuff. So you know what? Let's make everything simple as possible for these guys. But the good thing, like I said, I haven't used Procreate enough to say I know how to do that stuff. But using Clip Studio, I know if I want to do lettering, I could customize it to whatever way I want. The tails, the word balloons, you could customize it.
I actually, one of the problems I have with Tails, besides consistency, is also like there's a bit of an editorial thing when you talk about tails. Like, do you make it small? Do you make it long? Do you make it? You got it because you have to make sure that your tail looks like it's coming from your character, but you don't want it to look different than the tails you've done in all of the other pages as well. And there's a bit of an editorial, like sort of artistic choice that happens when you're
And
doing
what
tails.
size do you do it? Do you do it this long, this small?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
another thing. Yeah.
So it's like there's so much, and like I wrestle with that so much, and I will go through a book and adjust those quite a bit when I'm going through it. So there's a lot of creative choices, and even when you get to like word balloons, like shapes of word balloons, like balloons are fine, but then you got like thought bubbles, so you want those to look like
That's
proper.
it. Yes.
Then you also have like there's like the spiky sort of word balloons and different sort of attitudes if you want to use those. It's a lot of like you can express a lot in just
Yeah.
the shape of your word balloons.
Now, mentioning that, you brought up a point earlier. This is a previous video where we were talking about your lecture you did, and the person mentioned that uppercase means yelling.
Yes. So that's an interesting problem with lettering and with sort of the social world right now, is if you think about it, all of your comic books are yelling at you. But I think in comic book terms, yelling tends to be in bold, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's
Bold and
just
sometimes slightly larger font size.
yeah, so just sort of pushed out a little bit more, like
Yes.
bold and larger. So that is generally the case, but that is, I mean, if you think about it, it's funny because I find that phones, a lot of and I talked about this in my lecture a little bit, phones have sort of taken a lot of cartoon language and started to use them like with emojis and everything like that.
Yes.
But when it comes to fonts, there's a bit of a separation.
So that's interesting point because my daughter, I'm going to use her as an example, a 12-year-old. She reads a lot of manga, but if I text her, it's funny, if I text her with capitals, I wonder if she'd say, "Why are you yelling at me?"
Yeah, maybe is there a separation, or is it a personal thing? Like, and it's funny though. I
Yeah.
read comic book. When I read a comic book, I don't even think about it being all caps. It's just the way it always has been.
But here's the thing: we're adjusted to it. We've already been what do you call it?
Like acclimatized to it, right?
Acclimatized to it. Where I'm wondering if a new reader who comes on and says, "What? Why is this all caps?"
Yeah, unless it's a Rob Liefeld comic book, because his characters are always in like this straight eye
that's
mode
it.
all the time, so they always are
Now-
actually yelling.
Now, some research I did online about lettering and stuff like that, one of the guys mentioned saying going back to the 50s and 60s, 40s and 50s, reason they used the caps was, first of all, printing wise, it was much easier and faster to do it, letter a page in and that. But the comment he made was interesting that, when you have uppercase lettering, you didn't think of it too much because it was a childish approach to it. Childish, you're doing not real literature, because what was I wrote it down somewhere. He said something about adult, was it adult style lettering?
Interesting.
Which was thinking, but North American attitude had the, again, the phobia of comics and stuff being for kids and all this. And, why put upper and lowercase lettering? Why make it, like a novel? Because technically it's not made for adults.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's definitely a lot of like psychology behind it, and I'm sure finding the real reason why they did it, why they chose to use all uppercase, way back is there's probably like a lot of answers that are correct in
I think a
combination.
lot of them are correct, but I think it's probably speed mainly. It's like, you know what, just do all uppercase. You don't, because one thing you have to remember using these things, and when you're drawing the lines, you have the whatever lines you're drawing, do your uppercase lettering. But if you're doing lowercase, you have to draw additional lines.
Although sometimes like I sometimes do the middle line like for like the letter E, so I know where to put the little sort of midpoint, like almost like you do a midpoint on a face to some degree, like so I know where the middle of a letter should be, like, and same with the G, like where the little thing should come back around is sort of in the middle. So I tend
So
to
think
when I'm
about-
lettering.
So think about what you said earlier. Let's say a letterer who has a book to be, sent to a colorist, whatever, inker or whatever, process in the old days, he or she's not going to spend so much time thinking about uppercase, lowercase. Just do uppercase, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Give me my next book.
I also imagine you don't have to worry about things like names. So like capital, like you said at the beginning where you didn't capitalize your name when you wrote it. There's all kinds of
Yes.
like things in the English language where, if you're doing uppercase and lowercase, you have to decide when a letter should be uppercase. And sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. And so I wonder too if that eliminates that problem entirely, because all uppercase, you don't have to worry about that at all.
Now, here's one side topic on this, lettering wise. Modern age, and I have two teenage 12-year-old and a 16-year-old. And, asking those type of people to letter or sign or write, they don't know, it's hard. And I've been teaching my kids for the last couple of years to sign their name. Because now I see a lot of kids now, they're printing their name because they don't know how to sign. Come on,
Yeah.
cursive.
Yeah,
Cursive writing is gone, and it's an art form, like, what do you call it? What's that? Is it detailing on cars and stuff when they do the fancy lettering
Yeah.
and all that stuff? And signs, that's an art unto itself. I
Yeah,
mean, the
it's true.
brushes they use, remember at Curry's they used to have these long oval-shaped brushes, and,
Yeah.
and when I watch these people letter, it's like, it's
amazing.
It's magic. Yeah, it's magic.
But I feel like you kind of close your mind when you're not writing anymore, you're drawing. Because that's actually one of the examples I have is we had a party once at our house, and we had to do little signs. We had a teapot and a coffee pot that looked kind of the same, and so I had to write coffee and tea, and so I thought I'd do it fancy. So I actually spent some time and did little signs for it, but I didn't think of it by the time I was actually inking it and coloring it. I didn't think of it as being letters anymore, and it became pieces of art, and they actually came out
Yes.
okay. And so I think when you get to a certain point, the letters, like when you're doing something fancy, even somebody who does detail, does the car painting or whatever, I think that they don't think of it as letters anymore, and it's like art.
But-
it's like we treat art.
But here's the thing: there is the thin line on that also. Let's give an example. Let's say you're buying the latest Batman book. The letter on that, no disrespect to the letters on those books or anything like that. Honestly, I don't think they care how they letter that book. It's letter it, that's it. But
Yeah.
then you have a book like Sandman, where you look at Todd Klein lettering it. He had different styles of fonts and stuff for different characters. Same thing with the word balloons.
Yeah.
So he made that into an art form that goes with that book, and the book, story's amazing, art's amazing, lettering's amazing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, to some degree, you can almost look back at your argument of comic books being for kids. So for the kids' comic books, you just use this standard kid font. But then for the adult
Yes.
comic books, that's when you sort of get crazy and, a little more detailed.
And that's the best example I could give, because look at any Sandman book. You'll see different fonts, different lettering styles, and, kudos to Todd Klein. I mean, he did an amazing job on that book.
I mean, you should pat yourself on the back a little bit too. TikTok Tom some of those stories play with fonts quite a bit.
Yeah,
You know,
but that's just coming from an art background. You're just, going, you know what, let me try this, let me try that.
I think he might be doing the same too. Like, I think he's a professional, but I think to some degree, when he does a book like Sandman, he's like, there might be a discussion. Hey, have a bit of fun with this one, play with the fonts a little bit. So I think that he probably in the same spirit.
And I'm gonna, I feel guilty now. I think I've become lazy on that with the computer now. Because before, when I was doing hand lettering, you could get away with that. And like you said earlier about the, rub down letter lettering, if it became cracked or peeled off, it made the artwork, it went along with the artwork.
Exactly. So I feel like you had a bit of that in TikTok Tom, at least in the past. There's still a bit now. Like some of the guys who create that, who do the lettering, they do some wacky lettering that's just like really fun stuff. So, so I think it's still there. So I think books like that, like TikTok Tom and like Sandman, like I think you fit in that same category with TikTok Tom.
Thank you.
It's like,
Thank you.
Like Blue Orchid is just standard kids font, your standard anime font, but every story in TikTok Tom could be this like wild, crazy adventure.
We should do a comic using Comic Sans.
I don't know if I could bring myself to that.
Yeah, same here. And I think we'll get so many people, protesting. Why waste time doing that?
I think we would have an easier time doing our episode on AI than we would doing a comic book in
Comic Sans.
So I think
okay,
there's more. Yeah. I think we covered it. I think we've gone through quite a bit.
We covered everything on lettering. Now, if there's anyone watching and would like to, comment on anything else, please let us know if we missed anything. Because love to hear about this.
Comment here or go to our Instagram page. Check it out.
Yes, and thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.